Before we look at individual ratios, these top ratios to look at from a financial perspective, just a couple real quick things to keep in mind whenever you're evaluating a company using really any ratio. First off, where do ratios come from? Well, the balance sheet, the income statement, and the cash flow statement. That's where their original numbers and things come from, and they then come from the operations of the business. So when they have sales, for example, that's all aggregated, and then that ends up in, let's say, like an income statement as revenue. So it's from the operations of the organization, but it's balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow statement is where you're going to see where these ratios come from. And one thing that's really, really, really important is to compare ratios within the same industry, or comparing companies versus one another in the same industry versus outside their industry. Because a company might look great compared to the broader market, but within its industry, it might not be as great a performer. Or there might be things that, like, technology stocks or something like that might have high price to earnings or high price ratios because they're very big growth stocks, and which could be a great thing, but you might shy away from them because you look at the broader market and see lower price to earnings stocks or lower PE ratios and say, wow, those seem like safer bets. Well, they may or may not be. So it all depends on that industry. So do compare within the industry. Another couple key real important things is some ratios are more important than others depending on the industry itself. So if you think about it, not all ratios are the same. They're all the same as far as calculation, but some industries reward or it's more impactful for certain ratios than others. Let me give you an example here to kind of drive that home. Inventory turn ratio, which is how fast are you selling your products and goods, how fast are you turning that inventory. The faster you can turn your inventory, the better efficiencies you have, the better profitability you have. So inventory turn is an important ratio. It's a very, very important ratio for like retail companies. Because you think about it, a retailer has a lot of inventory, right? You go to a big store and they have lots of inventory. Let's say it's a clothing retailer. They have lots of different styles of clothing. Maybe it's different seasonality of clothing, winter, spring, summer, fall. And so they got a lot of different stuff just for a clothing retailer, let alone somebody who does hard goods as well. So how fast they turn that inventory is very important when you're evaluating a retail stock. It might be less important when you look at something that doesn't carry a lot of inventory, maybe like a media company, for example. It has assets, yeah, but it has digital assets, but it doesn't have those hard goods sitting on a shelf that's got to be sold, or are also going to be marked down as a loss or sold on clearance because summer has ended, winter is coming, and now people are buying parkas and they're not buying shorts or things for summer or swimwear, for example. So inventory turn is a real important retail, or wouldn't be in other industries. So same thing with any of these ratios. Understand which ones are more important within certain industries. Also, some ratios are more important by the type of stock than others as well. Some are important across lots of different things. The only price to earnings is important, but it's a way to value growth and value stocks, for example. But if you're looking at, let's say, dividend stocks, dividend yield or dividend payout ratio, those things are related specifically to dividends, well, those are life or death for you. You really are wanting to buy a company that's got a good dividend yield that'll continue to pay it. Well, that's very, very important. And you want to really compare companies and really analyze that dividend payout and that dividend yield versus, let's say, a technology firm or a health firm or somewhere that pays no dividend at all. Like, how can you compare a company that doesn't pay a dividend? Dividend yield doesn't mean anything anyways. It's no big deal. Or if you look at, we'll use technology again. There's some technology companies like Microsoft that pay a dividend, but are you going to buy Microsoft because it just pays a dividend? Well, you might, but maybe you want to go with more growth stocks in technology, for example. Either way, for dividend stocks, that ratio is more important than maybe even like a retailer with inventory turn. Maybe it's a retailer that pays a dividend and you might be more concerned about dividend yield. So the type of stock, whether it's a growth or an income type stock, can make a difference as well. And understand there's lots of ratios out there. There's hundreds of ratios, and I'm going to give you some here that are the real key ones, the ones that you see across the different categories, from liquidity to all sorts of things, evaluation. If you do these ratios, you're going to be fine. At least you'll get a starting point. Many people don't use ratios at all, but if you're going to use ratios, these are the key ones that are used over and over again. If you try to analyze a company by like 100 different ratios versus 10 other companies, that's just going to take a lot of time and might even lead to paralysis by analysis where you don't make any decisions at all. Or maybe you start looking at some ratios that aren't important and thinking they're important. That can cause some behavioral behavioral issues or cause some problems as far as investing because you looked at the wrong ratio that wasn't important because it was the number 30th ranked ratio for that industry, so to speak. So when you're looking at ratios, here's some key ones that we're going to look at now that if you do these, it'll really give you a great start and really understand these well when you're starting off and really starting to compare companies. And if you want to go beyond that, feel free, and using your qualitative and your quantitative analysis.